Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life with your host, Linda Lang.
Hi, this is Linda Lang from ThoughtChange.com. Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life. If you enjoy our conversations, remember to subscribe, share with a friend. We have a really fascinating conversation for you today. I have Gitta Lassen with me. Gitta is a code master. Welcome, Gitta.
Hi, everybody. It's actually pretty cool to be here and talk about codes because it's something I'm very passionate about. I can't remember if you and I talked about this, but I have been in this business for 30 years and, trying all the methods. And when I really hit working with the archetypal codes, it's like suddenly all the things I had tried, all the work I'd done on myself for 30 years and not really getting to where I wanted to, it's like suddenly when I started working with the codes, that became possible. It became inevitable. How's that for cool?
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, when you say codes, what do you mean?
This is a question I get often, right? Because when people think about consciousness, it's more like thought to belief. And when they think about energy, it's more like a vibration. But I find it very helpful to think of it as codes. Usually explain it by comparing it to a molecule or protein in the body, right? It's like molecules of proteins, they carry very, very, very specific programming that once it comes to the appropriate cell, and very specific, very defined, very precise reaction or action takes place, right? So the molecule or the protein is a code, or even a hormone, right? It's a code that carries a very, very specific message. And this is this kind of code I'm talking about, very precisely defined. This code gives this thought. This code, makes you feel this feeling. This code, this happens in your consciousness. So they are very, very specific and very clearly defined.
And you mentioned that they're associated with archetypes?
Yes, this is based on some work that was developed by a couple of people, actually not so many years ago. I mean, we know the archetypes, right? They have existed for probably since human beings became sentient, it's all the gods and goddesses, this is all the archetypes. And we know it from Jung, but there's a couple of women, not so long time ago who actually figured out that we have four main channels of archetypes in our consciousness. And these four channels, they carry all the codes for how we live. So you have a channel for the soul, you have a channel for the spirit, you have a channel for the body, you have a channel for the mind. And once you really get it, you can see that everything fits into one of these channels. And when you get that familiar with the archetypal codes, you suddenly get a freedom from, a freedom of choice you didn't have before, because you realize, oh, but I want to animate a different code than the code I'm animating now, because animating this code now is not giving me what I want. So I'm just going to flip to another code and animate that. That's then going to support me in what I want to create.
Are there positive and negative archetypes, or are there archetypes that can be expressed positively or negatively?
If you think of each of the four channels as it has different levels, a very, very low frequency, fear-based, survival-based, victim consciousness-based, it's kind of sitting at the bottom. And it's a set of four, we call them shadow archetypes. They carry all our low self-esteem and, I'm not good enough and what are people going to think about me and I have to be perfect and I don't want to take responsibility. I want people to do it for me. The codependence, the crisis, the drama, the whole indulgence in emotions thing, it's all sitting, at the lowest level in the shadow archetypes. Now, the next level is where you actually unhook yourself from the shadow archetypes, right? And you step into the power archetypes. They carry codes for power. Those are the archetypes that will help you thrive. The shadow archetypes, which is what humankind has been operating on since, they first came into existing, because they are specifically, very, very specifically geared to help us survive. And they will never be able to get you into thriving because this is not what they're about. This is not what the codes, right? This is why it really helps, with the coding. One of the ways I often describe it is like, a set of the archetypes, like, for example, the 4 shadow archetypes. It's like an operating system in your consciousness. And the operating system, just like you have an operating system in your computer, it determines what you can create. If you have an operating system that is like 20 years out of date, you can't use your fancy new software and applications to create something because the operating system is like outdated. And this is what we're looking at, at this day and age where shadow consciousness has really helped us. It has helped human beings survive. But now we need to move beyond survival into thriving. And the shadow archetypes, the shadow codes, they cannot do that.
So we want to actually switch our archetypes and step into a more empowered programming, if you like, or pattern.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? I mean, is it, through conscious intention?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's always conscious attention, right? It's like intention. You've got to be aware first that you're running on the shadow archetypes. And it's like running the archetypes because this is what, we have done like through all our past lives, through our history, the ancestral, energetic inheritance, the programming, everything we learn in society is all run on shadow codes. So we always have to start with really learning what are the shadows. I mentioned before that there's 4 main channels of codes in our consciousness. One has to do with soul, one has to do with spirit, one has to do with body, and one has to do with mind. And at the bottom of each channel, and with the bottom, I mean, it's like the lowest frequency. We have the prostitute for the soul, which is not really about sex, but it's about value. Selling your soul for, safety and security. This is what the prostitute shadow archetype is about. So this is all about needing people to approve of you, because if you're approved of, then you can remain part of the tribe so that you won't die. Because, way back when, if you were kicked out of the tribe, you would die, right? So it's really so ingrained in our most primitive brain, even this programming, you can't get kicked out of the tribe. People have to approve of you. And then the whole thing becomes, the fear of, are they going to like it or not going to like it? Am I too powerful? Do I stand out? Are people going to take offense? Am I perfect enough? And it just runs our whole life that, we got to have other people's approval. We got to have other people's approval, because if we don't, something terrible is going to happen. We're going to die. So one of the ways it shows up is definitely modulating her self-expression in order to get people's approval. And you can think of people pleasing and holding herself back and undervaluing herself and, settling for less than she wants, because at least this way she gets other people's approval. She doesn't rock the boat, because that's scary, right? It threatens survival. In the spirit channel, you have the child shadow that sits at the bottom there, which is easy to understand if you think of like a real human child, right? It's like needs everything done for them, doesn't really want to take responsibility, They like to dream. And it's a lot about like comparing yourself with others. This is what a child does, right? Somebody has a better toy than me, and then the whole spoiled brat attack and temper tantrum when you don't get instant gratification. And then, that's not fair. She has a bigger toy than me. It's like the powerlessness, because you don't really own your power. Child doesn't own her power, right? I mean, you can just think of, what a real life child is, just wants to go out and play with the toys, not take responsibility, have somebody else do it for her, has spoiled brat attacks if they don't get instant gratification. One of the things I have is like a lot of spiritual entrepreneurs, their business is like a fantasy. It's like toys, but they haven't really stepped into this is what they want to create and take the responsibility and, really step into the power, because the spirit channel is really about owning your power. So it will be moving from the child to the sovereign, which is your power archetype, just like the lover is the power archetype for the soul channel, for the prostitute, right? The prostitute switch up to the lover, who says, this is my value. This is what I want. I don't care if anybody approves of me. I'm willing to sacrifice anything to live the life I choose to live. Right? It's like completely freeing yourself from this need for tribal approval and looking to others, to determine your self-value. In the body channel, we have the victim. And, we know victims, right? The poor me, the martyr, survivors, There's a lot of survivors that get stuck in the victim archetype. It's a whole codependence thing, right? It's like if I take responsibility for your happiness, you're obliged to take responsibility for my happiness too, but I'm certainly not going to ask you to do it, right? It's just all going to be unspoken. So the whole codependence relationship things is part of the victim channel. It's, oh, poor me. Oh, woe is me. It's so hard. It's so overwhelming. I can't handle it. Oh, these poor victims out there, I got to go out and rescue them. I mean, we've all been there, right? And a victim sees other people's like victims, yeah.
I think that's really important to remember that we have all of these codes in us.
Yeah. And then the power archetype that sits in the same channel as a victim is the warrior. If you think of a warrior, like kind of the archetype of a warrior is like you just have the strength and you just do what needs to be done, and you will, stand by your word, and you will not give up, and you will keep on doing it. And if you need to rally the troops, and you will rally the troops to get this thing done, because what a warrior, they go out and win the war. They might lose a few battles on the way, but they don't give up, right? They just keep at it until they win the war. And the war is, of course, what is that you want to create? So the warrior is really where we, move into taking, action, because really what we're doing, we're turning energy into matter. And then the last channel is the mind channel. And, you all know how we can do the mental, internal, negative dialogue, the constant analyzing, going over the past, analyzing it. So this is a saboteur, right? It's because this is where your mind really sabotages you. It's not logical. It's not reasonable. Oh, it has to be perfect. Oh, I have to know more. I don't have any credibility, and this is like such a sense of mental dryness. There's no fun. It's just like very, very serious. Like I used to have as one of my warning symptoms that, I looked out for was, am I feeling serious right now? Because that would mean I was in my saboteur. It's like no fun in life. And then the corresponding power archetype would then be the magician. And, it's all in the word, right? I believe in magic. I'll follow my intuition. I don't care if it's logical. I'll do it anyway, because this is what my intuition tells me to do.
That saboteur is very interesting to me, because I always thought of saboteur as being very unconscious, but not necessarily being that serious. So that's a really interesting tip to kind of notice.
Yeah. When you find yourself trying to figure out things, like you're trying really hard to think things through and like really plan and, like plan the whole future, it's like I feel very much the saboteur shadow archetype wants to like be in control, that everything happens the way it wants to avoid a crisis, right? So it's plotting and planning and figuring out, and it is so mental.
And it can freeze you right up trying to figure out which is the perfect plan, and the magic can't come in.
You have closed the door for magic. And this is what happened then. It's like when you disconnect yourself from the shadow archetypes, which is like something you have to learn to do. You really have to learn the specific codes of the shadows and learn to really see them so that you can take one after the other. It's like kind of you're looking for the cumulative effect, right? So that your new default operating system is the power codes, right? It takes a while to get over, and you just get on it and on it and on it. But the interesting thing is that you don't have to go in and analyze what happened in the past and why you're feeling this way. You just take, oh, this is what's happening in the moment. Let me just like figuring out what the shadow is, what's the core shadow here, and like flip it around, disconnect from it and you deliberately step into the corresponding power archetype, but you have to be very precise for it to really work. But once you get there, right, it's like you don't need to think anymore because you just know.
I really like that you don't have to mind the past because you can get stuck in that story and then you're just strengthening that archetype.
Yeah. Part of the victim archetype is like being very attached to the past, and justifying the reason why the shadow is active now and why you shouldn't unhook from the shadow, right? Where you can just say, okay, this happened. I'm not going to buy into this anymore. I'm just going to go into my warrior. And then that's it. You're done, right? It's like it can happen like this. And this is one of the beauties of it. I mean, I was around when you did rebirthing and, all these things, right? It's like, the effort and the intensity, and you got like temporary relief, and then you were right back animating the same shadows again because you were still running shadow codes, right? You never really flipped out of them.
So, Gitte, you use this quite a bit with spiritual entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And also with prosperity. But what else could you use the codes for?
I mean, this is about life. These are the codes that govern life, right? I know people who use it with relationships. I use, people who use it with health, with personal training. These are the codes that everybody and everything, once you know them, you take it everywhere.
And change your life, right?
How do you unhook for this, right? It's like, you do it like one code at a time, right? So you often realize that you're operating in shadow because you just have a negative feelings associated, or you have like this negative self-talk, or, you don't believe in yourself. These are all symptoms of, running the shadow codes, like the shadow code operating system. And you have to become extremely familiar with it. And then you will just take, whenever you realize one is active, you will just, do the work of dismantling the construct, seeing this is not true, because shadow is not true, right? You're not powerless. We know it. So it's not, the power codes are not unfamiliar. It's just, we know them here, but we don't live them because we're still animating the shadow codes. So in the moment, you have to do the work. There's different ways of doing it where you say, no, it's not true that I'm powerless to deal with this situation. I have the power to do it. And then you just kind of like flip the switch inside of you. And once the power codes are activated and you live in that, it's like the whole world becomes different, right? Because I choose how much value I have. I don't have anybody ever approves of me. I don't need anybody to do it for me. I can do it myself. I want to do it myself. I have all the power I need to do it, It is not something you're trying to convince yourself is true. It is, right? This is why we're working with the codes, because all the other methods I have come across in my 30 years of, being in this business, you have been like through 1,000 methods, right? And seeing them, evolve over time and, how everything got speeded up. And I kind of feel that, with the 2012 and, the changes that was coming as a result of, we coming into the age of the sixth sun, it's like working with the codes became possible in a way it has never been before. Who you think you are, because this is all you know from living in shadow, is actually not at all who you are, right? It's like you're this incredibly powerful person that just goes and create life. And you don't have to deal with all these negative thoughts. They just disappear, right? And all these negative feelings, they just disappear, and you don't have these self-limiting beliefs because the codes of those are no longer in your system. And that's why it's so cool to work with the codes.
You were talking about the prostitute archetype, and we all know so many people, right, that do jobs that they absolutely hate because of the money or the security or what's expected of them. And especially our generation, I think there's a lot of people in our generation. And I look at the young, people, and man, their energy is really shifting things. They're just not taking the rules.
I always think of how the famous saying, we're not human beings on a spiritual journey, we're spiritual beings on a human journey. And it's like almost like we have done the human journey, because this is what the shadow codes are about, right? Surviving as a human species. There's very few parts of the world where the population still it's just based on survival. We really moved beyond that. So in that way, as a species, we are just set to, springboard into the next level, which means we just have to give up the shadow codes. They're not serving the species anymore. We need to move on, which is moving into our power as divine creators. But just because you unhook from the shadow codes so that you don't live according to shadow anymore, it doesn't mean that the journey ends. It is just a journey where there's nothing negative. You have no negative feelings, you have no negative thoughts, you have no negative self-beliefs. It's just a journey where it's all positive, but you still, you still live the three-dimensional life, you still have to, go out and make money and get something to eat and take care of your body. That doesn't end, but there's nothing negative. Like all the struggle disappears, all the pain, all the emotional agony, Yeah.
I think your work is fascinating. Gitta, if any of the listeners would like to connect, how can they do that?
Okay, my website, Metamystique. Everything is named Metamystique. My YouTube channel is Metamystique. My Instagram is Metamystique with a dot after meta. And if you go on my website, I have a free gift available for you, which is like a challenge I did where I introduced all the archetypes that I've just talked about here, but in much more detail. And this was where you met me, Linda, right? So this is how you got interested in them and we ended up there. So this is available for free. You can find it through my website. It's called Ignite.
And it is a fascinating journey. So I highly recommend. Thank you so much for being my guest today, Gitta.
It's my pleasure, Linda.
And thank you for listening to this week's edition of Exploring the Mystical Side of Life. You will find all of our conversations on YouTube, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio. Come visit me at ThoughtChange.com, pick up your copy of Learning to Listen, and explore what energy medicine can do for you. That's it for this week. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.